Hi everyone, today I would like to talk about one of the first ships which I ever loved, which is Buffy and Spike. Now, Buffy and Spike's relationship is often up for debate because many people don't feel like it's a loving relationship, that it was just sex, or that it wasn't supposed to happen in the first place. And the reason why I feel like many people don't understand Buffy and Spike's relationship is because it's undefinable. The moment in which you start defining Buffy and Spike, they transition into something else. The first stage is the hate stage. We're first introduced to Spike when he literally rolls into town in season 2 together with Drusilla and is introduced as the new big bad of the season. The fact that Buffy and Spike start out their relationship as enemies is significant for two reasons. One, because there is a dynamic straight away between them, which is sometimes underlined by humor.
Oh.
What's wrong? Not that I care.
In my head, I think I'm sobering up. It's horrible. Oh, God, I wish I was dead.
Well, if you close your eyes and wish real hard.
Hey, back off, Buffy.
Other times by strong tension. Either way, the relationship between Buffy and Spike is immediately passionate.
I'll tell you what. As a personal favor from me to you, I'll make it quick. It won't hurt a bit.
No, Spike. It's gonna hurt a lot.
Secondly, because by starting out as enemies, they don't try to impress each other. They see pretty much the worst of one another, with Spike realizing that Buffy is far more powerful than he thought she would be, and Buffy realizing that perhaps Spike is much more complex than any other vampire that she ever met before. More on this later. Let's fast forward into the second more relevant stage in the Buffy and Spike relationship, which is the alliance. At the beginning of season 5, Spike is still rendered harmless to humans because of the chip that was implanted by the initiative. And Buffy decides not to kill him for what I believe are two important reasons. One, because of Buffy's high morals, which work against her in fighting and basically killing someone, even a vampire that cannot defend himself. But most importantly, because Spike has utility. So they start forming an uncanny alliance. Spike can unleash all of his repressed violence into the monsters, and Buffy can get information out of Spike. However, something changes from Spike's side in the episode Out of My Mind. At first, we see a repetition of Spike's typical behavior in that he tries to have his chip removed to kill the Slayer. Buffy stops his plan and he fails. However, his reaction to what has happened is quite different from what we've seen so far, foreshowing the level of obsession towards Buffy that Spike will gradually build into.
You don't understand. I can't get rid of her. She's everywhere. She's haunting me, Harmony.
This leads to the famous scene in which Spike literally awakens and discovers his crush/love for Buffy. Here, Leigh Clements highlights the importance of colors in the show. The scene is shot in an ambiguous tint, which is neither light nor dark. Buffy wears a white shirt, symbolic of purity, matched with red leather pants, symbolic of lust and sensuality. Spike, on the other hand, wears all black, symbolic of evil or death, which in the dream he tears apart, metaphorically removing his evil appearance to show to Buffy his hidden vulnerability. So, although for Buffy nothing has changed, Spike started developing romantic feelings which are obviously one-sided. And this is interesting to watch for us as an audience because this is the first instance in which we see a vampire fall for a Slayer. And you may say, but Julia, what about Angel? Well, Angel, it is different because Angel was an adversary just in principle for Buffy because he's a vampire.
You cannot have a crush on something that is dead and evil and a vampire.
Right, that's why you're never with Angel for 3 years.
Angel's different. He has a soul.
And also they don't share any personal history. Spike and Buffy do share personal history. They try to kill each other several times. So Spike tries to modify his typically bad behavior to appeal to Buffy, which remains pretty unimpressed.
I'm not sampling, I'll have you know. I mean, look at all these lovely blood-covered people.
I could, but not a taste for Spike, not a lick. I knew you wouldn't like it.
You want credit for not feeding off bleeding disaster victims?
Well, yeah.
You're disgusting.
Spike also starts to become increasingly obsessive, collecting items from Buffy, building what is basically a shrine, and buying a Buffy bot.
Spike? Oh, Spike.
And yet, when you start thinking that you can't possibly like Spike again because he has become very creepy, he lets Glory torture him and to not give up Dawn's name, Buffy's little sister, which happens to be the key that Glory is looking for. It's here that we see the difference between the typical Spike's antics, like the shrine and the Buffy bot, which represents a selfish desire, and his actual sentiment for Buffy, which he doesn't want to see hurt by the death of her sister.
Glory never finds out.
Why?
Because Buffy, the other, not so pleasant Buffy, anything happened to Dawn, it'd destroy her. I couldn't live her being in that much pain.
Joss Whedon shows us that by acting selflessly, Spike obtained his first unexpected reward from Buffy.
What you did for me and Dawn, that was real. I won't forget it.
So while we start the season with Buffy horrified at the idea of Spike loving her because she sees him as nothing more than a tamed monster, by the end of the season, she ends up entrusting him with Dawn's life.
I'm counting on you to protect her.
Till the end of the world.
Buffy's trust towards Spike can also be seen in the episode Crush, when she invites him back into the house, revoking her previous rejection. Yet, while Spike recognizes and appreciates this difference, he understands that his love cannot be reciprocated and is willing, as some have noted, to stand below Buffy, while she maintains a metaphorical elevated state from him. Joss Whedon also ties Spike's uncanny love towards Buffy with his actual human persona. In the episode Fool for Love, we see Spike's human backstory and his social fragility as an outcast and hopeless romantic.
I know I'm a bad poet, but I'm a good man. All I ask is that you try to see me.
I do see you. That's the problem. You're nothing to me, William.
I think the show established very early on and on several occasions that Spike is different from other vampires.
Okay, fine. You're not down with Angel. Why would you ever come to me?
I want Drew back. I want it like it was before he came back. The way she acts around him.
You're pathetic.
Right after he's turned, he's shown to love his human mother, which also turns, hoping to end their sufferings. We have seen him understand human emotions, sometimes even better than humans, providing actual weird insights into their relationships. Like, for example, when he tells Buffy and Angel that they can never be friends.
What's wrong?
His attachment and love for Drusilla and his hilarious chats with Joyce around the kitchen table have all been a clear portrayal of his humanity still present despite his soulless state. Joss Whedon shows once again the human vulnerability of Spike in the season 5 finale when he cries at the sight of Buffy's dead body. And so we enter the third stage of Buffy and Spike's relationship, the lust. At the beginning of the 6th season, Buffy is still gone, still dead, and Spike continues to help her friends and protect her sister, fight alongside Good, despite never actually liking her friends. If Spike's love were immature and conditional, Buffy's death would finish things and he'd return to his old life. Instead, he stays in a life that doesn't fit him, helping her friends and protecting his sister, knowing that he'll never see her again and still loving her hopelessly. When Buffy is resurrected, she turns to Spike as the only person who can truly understand what she went through.
Her hands.
I was gonna fix them. I don't know how they got like that.
I do. Clawed her way out of a coffin, that's how. Isn't that right?
Yeah. That's what I had to do.
I've done it myself.
The first meeting mirrors that mentioned in the season 5 when she still maintains an elevated state from him. She stops midway through the stairs, and this is a way to showcase that despite everything, the relationship is still unbalanced. In the scene where Buffy tells Spike that she thinks she was in heaven, he can't move forward because he's in the dark, because the sunlight hurts him, whether she then steps into the light afraid that she said too much. And this is an indication, a metaphorical indication of how season 6 will progress. The Slayer must learn to embrace darkness to become stronger. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let's rewind. At this point, Spike, yes, loves Buffy, but he's still soulless, is still a demon. His selfishness shines through several times when he tries to pull Buffy into complete darkness with him. This is important because it showcases how love doesn't necessarily translate into trust. Buffy at this point can rely on Spike, but she can't trust him. Partly this is because of Spike's soulless nature, but it also has to do with irrational imposition that Buffy puts on herself because she doesn't want to be the kind of person that respects and falls for another vampire, and a soulless one at that.
He's everything that I'm supposed to be against. The only time that I ever feel anything is when...
It's not that simple.
It is. It's wrong. I'm wrong.
But whenever she stops thinking about it and acts on instincts, she protects Spike and she shows compassion towards him. In that things, when Spike asks whether she trusts him, she says never, yet she lets him uncuff her. When they both touch the crypt's door, showcasing an uncanny connection, she then walks away and rationally says to herself,
Don't think about the evil blood-sucking fiend. Focus on anything but the evil blood-sucking fiend.
Both Buffy and Spike abuse one another, loathe themselves, and have an inward good versus evil struggle in their minds.
It won't let me be a monster. And I can't be a man. I'm nothing.
Buffy is empty. She struggles to feel anything at all, as also highlighted by her song Going Through the Motions in the Once More with Feeling episodes. And being with Spike lets her feel a sort of excitement derived by his danger, which at least lets her feel something.
I've been so detached. We've all been kind of slumming. Every day I try to snap out of it. Figure out why I'm like that.
In this sense, it's significant that the first time that Buffy decides to have sex with Spike is when she knows that his cheat doesn't work on her, because in that situation, during sex, a vulnerable state, they can be both easily killed. We see how self-destructive this behavior is for both of them. Self-destruction that is visually implied during their first sexual scene, where the house in which they have sex, already on shaky grounds, is completely annihilated. In the As You Were episode, where the good guy Riley comes back, Buffy has a realization. She tells Spike that she can't love him. Can't. Not, wouldn't, or does not. And she finally recognizes him as a human, as a man, not as a monster, as she says goodbye to him with his human name.
I'm sorry, William.
I think this is one of the main points in which Buffy realizes that not everything is completely good or completely evil. It's not as black and white as she so stubbornly wanted it to be in the previous seasons. One of the most controversial and upsetting episodes in Buffy the Vampire Slayer, Seeing Red, is the one that marks the next stage into the relationship, the betrayal. I'm talking about the utterly horrifying episode in which Spike tries to rape Buffy in an attempt of going back into their last stage. It is weird to see how Whedon decided to frame this episode, to actually just make this episode, considering that many viewers started to see Spike as a worthy companion for Buffy. However, I think it was necessary. It is just Whedon's way to keep us in check, to make us realize that Spike is still a soulless vampire, a monster, although a very hot one at that. James Master, the actor portraying Spike, in an interview has said, "I think that what Joss Whedon wanted to communicate was, look guys, I know he's charming, but he's evil. He's a bad boyfriend. It would be bad to date a guy like this." And I think he wanted to reinforce that in the most dramatic way imaginable. The problem is that while with Angel, we never make him accountable for the crimes he commits as Angelus, because we can strongly identify the difference between his human personality and his soulless one. Spike's evolution starts when he's still without a soul, making us forget that he doesn't have one. With Angel, we never see him take responsibility for the crimes he commits as Angelus, like for example when he kills Miss Calendar, because we're meant to believe that those acts were out of his control.
Angel? He's not Angel anymore. Are you?
When Parker treats Buffy like crap after he sleeps with her, he doesn't apologize. She's the one who misunderstood him. When Riley becomes more insecure of Buffy's power and strength, and realizes that she doesn't need a protective man by her side, she cheats with vampires and then eventually gives her an ultimatum.
You didn't even call me when your mom went into the hospital.
I'm sorry. You know, I'm sorry that I couldn't take care of you when I thought that my mother was dying.
It's about me taking care of you. It's about letting me in, so you don't have to be on top of everything all the time.
But I do. That's part of what being a Slayer is. And that's what this is really about, isn't it? You can't handle the fact that I'm stronger than you.
Xander himself tries to rape Buffy in a season 1 episode, The Pack, and despite remembering what he has done under the hyena spirit, which can be equated to not having a soul, when he comes back to normal, he pretends he doesn't remember, so he doesn't have to face the consequences of it.
I've been reading up on my animal possession, and I cannot find anything anywhere about memory loss afterwards.
Did you tell them that?
Your secret dies with me.
The idea is that with Xander's status as a nice guy, and Angel and Riley characters, which have been framed since the beginning as good, their contrition is implied. We're meant to sympathize with a good character, which we actually haven't seen being good. In this sense, there is a recurrent theme in BTVS of men, both human and vampires, turning into monsters and refusing to acknowledge it. Spike, on the other hand, actively tries to change. He reiterates he's a monster, apologizes for the Buffy bot, and tries to redeem himself over and over again, pretty much going mad by the guilt that he feels. Yet, most of this doesn't even feel as nearly enough to some viewers, because Spike, since the very beginning, has been framed, in opposition to the other characters mentioned, as the villain. This episode also allows Spike, and the viewers as well, to see Buffy as more than simply the warrior woman. The horrifying scene in Seeing Red is very human. Buffy's vulnerability is striking. This augments Spike's struggle between humanity and vampire monstrosity. It is because of this act that Spike realizes once and for all that he needs to face his humanity fully rather than keeping himself and Buffy by extension into complete darkness. That same night, Spike leaves to try and get his soul back, and this leads us into the next and final stage of the relationship, which is the redemption. Spike goes through several trials and physical and mental punishments Yet he earns his soul back because, against all odds, he endures all of them. When we see him next, he's driven mad by his own remorse and guilt, past crimes and sins, and by the companionship of the first evil.
But you never will.
You'll always be mine. You'll always be in the dark with me.
Both Buffy and the viewers at this point are meant to not necessarily to forgive him or trust him, but to accept his act of atonement. The first evil eventually kidnaps and tortures Spike, mirroring fake images of Buffy to provide him with an illusory and momentary sense of relief. Spike proves his loyalty by refusing to cooperate, and just when he thinks he'll never be saved, Buffy, the real one this time, comes in and frees him. Whereas up until season 7, it was Spike that tried to convince Buffy that he could be good, now the roles reverse.
You faced the monster inside of you and you fought back. You risked everything to be a better man.
Buffy.
And you can be. You are. You may not see it, but I do. I do. I believe in you, Spike.
At this point, Buffy and Spike's relationship becomes ambiguous. It is difficult to put them into one specific box. When Angel comes back, unaware of the deep bond that has been forged between the two, tries to simplify Buffy's relationship with Spike by defining him as a boyfriend. Buffy rejects these old young love sort of categorizations, which instead I feel describe Buffy and Angel's relationship pretty well, and simply responds that Spike is in her heart. In the episode First Date, when Buffy tries to date Robin Wood, the principal, even him senses the connection between Buffy and Spike, although it is something that is not exactly straightforward, as we know, as viewers have struggled to come to terms with this relationship for a long time. In the same episode, when Giles rationally believes that releasing a vampire, even one with a soul, that the first evil is clearly after, is a bad idea, Buffy prefers to drive a wedge between her longtime watcher and perhaps father figure to give Spike the possibility of being good.
Spike has a soul now. That's what's going to stop him from hurting people.
Buffy.
He can be a good man, Giles. I feel it. But he's never going to get there if we don't give him the chance.
Once again, when the first evil reveals that he has unfinished plans for Spike, he wants to leave town, but Buffy wants him there. And her need is not based on Spike's utility, as in the previous seasons, nor on an identity loss that characterized season 6.
I should move out. Leave town. Before it is time for me.
No. You have to stay.
Oh, you got another demon fighting now.
That's not why I need you here.
Is that right? Why's that then?
Because I'm not ready for you to not be here.
In the episode Touched, when Spike finds out that Buffy has been excluded by the Scooby Gang, her friends, the potential slayers, and even her freaking sister, he goes and finds her and gives out one of the best speeches I ever heard.
Hey, look at me. I'm not asking you for anything. When I say I love you, it's not because I want you, or because I can't have you. It has nothing to do with me. I love what you are, what you do, how you try. I've seen your kindness and your strength. I've seen the best and the worst of you. And I understand with perfect clarity exactly what you are. You're a hell of a woman.
One of the recurring themes in Buffy is that although she can surround herself with great friends, the burden of being the Slayer is hers and hers alone. When everyone turns their back on her, her greatest fear comes alive. It is not surprising that this is exactly what the first evil manipulates her with.
There's that word again. What you are, how you'll die. Alone.
It is surprising instead that a former soulless vampire that has struggled with his own humanity is the only one that managed to truly understand her, value her, and gives her strength when she thinks she doesn't have any anymore. They both unconditionally believe in one another and instinctively are loyal to one another. Ultimately, it is Spike that Buffy chooses to be next to her during her final battle, while she sends Angel away. And it is also Spike, the one that she spends what they think may be their last night on Earth with. The final act of redemption for Spike is the ultimate sacrifice. He decides to die to kill his own kind so that Buffy and her kind can live. Spike is one of the most interesting characters ever portrayed on television for his ability to continually transform and evolve himself throughout the series. Buffy's underlying sense of being a slayer, the meaning behind being the slayer, comes full circle also thanks to Spike. The relationship is real and messy and very adult, and it transcends stereotypical representation of televised love. Joss Whedon managed to portray very problematic elements in adult relationships without normalizing them, yet providing hopeful representations of redemption and atonement, while at the same time evolving the main narrative, which has always revolved around Buffy's figure as an hero.